when people are left free to do their own thing, when people are free to trade, when people are free to exchange, when there's the basic rule of law, they get on with it and they prosper and they grow.
Welcome to another video in the IATP Explainer series. This week, we are joined by Douglas Carswell. Douglas Carswell is a former member of the UK Parliament, the author of 4 books, and he is currently the president and CEO of the Mississippi Center for Public Policy. What is the main thesis of your book, Progress versus Parasites?
Progress versus Parasites is an attempt to explain the history of the world as a struggle between what you might call the productive and the parasitic. Why are some countries prosperous and rich, and why are some countries poor? I argue that if people are free to exchange and people are free to trade, and if people are free to pursue their own interests, then they become rich. Unfortunately, through most of human history, people have been kept poor because a small parasitic elite has prevented them from engaging in commercial and economic freedom. And I suggest in the book that throughout history, elites are very good at finding pretexts for having power over the rest of society. But actually, by allowing small elites to have power over society, we end up impoverishing everyone. And so the book is what you might call a libertarian view of 2,000 years of human history.
Will Africa's future be one of progress or parasites?
It's really in the balance. I mean, if you look at some countries like Uganda or Rwanda, or even perhaps I would say Kenya, it's looking very good. You're seeing huge growth, you're seeing huge progress. And what's really exciting is that in those countries, the powerful elite are not inhibiting free exchange. What's a little bit more concerning is that in other parts of the continent, I'm thinking particularly, for example, in South Africa or Zimbabwe, a small parasitic elite very much is stifling innovation and I think arresting development. So I think what we see in Africa is a mixture of good and bad, of progress, but also in some countries, I'm afraid, small parasitic tyrants prevail. Where I'm really encouraged, though, is that Africa, rather like the United States, is decentralized. There's no single central political authority in Africa. So the different states in Africa do different things. And if people can see, for example, that economic growth is working in Botswana or Rwanda, hopefully neighbors can see that and try to emulate what those countries have got right. So I'm encouraged. I'm particularly excited, for example, that at the moment, countries like Tanzania seem to be making a conscious effort to emulate some of the neighboring success stories. So I think there is cause for optimism, but I don't think we should take anything for granted. I grew up under Idi Amin in Uganda, so my default outlook is not to be wildly optimistic, but I do have to say I do think there are some very encouraging signs out there.
You were raised in Uganda. How has Uganda changed over your lifetime, and what has caused this change?
I grew up in Uganda. I was raised there in the 70s and the 80s, and I have to say, when I was growing up out there, Uganda was not known as a success story. In fact, by almost every measure, it was going backwards. It was regressing. If you look at Uganda today, I mean, last time I was out there 2-3 years ago, it's an amazing turnaround. There is prosperity. There is a very obvious and emergent middle class. Everyone in downtown Kampala seems to have a business of some kind. There's enterprise, there's growth. It's a great success story. I think what Uganda tells us is that the human condition is when people are left free to do their own thing, when people are free to trade, when people are free to exchange, when there's the basic rule of law, they get on with it and they prosper and they grow. What goes wrong is when you get a dictator like Idi Amin who inhibits that process. Now, what we need to do is to make sure that governments in Africa don't do the sorts of things that Uganda did in the 70s and the 80s. In the 70s and the 80s, It wasn't just that Idi Amin was a tyrant. He expropriated property. He stopped the country from trading freely with its neighbors. He closed the border. And what that did is it impoverished all of Uganda. Whatever you think about the current president of Uganda, and however you measure Uganda in terms of democracy, undoubtedly it has a leadership at the moment that allows free enterprise, that allows ordinary Ugandans to get on and conduct business, and it's got the basic rule of law, and that has meant an extraordinary success story. If other countries in Africa could be as successful as Uganda, I think the future for Africa would look very bright indeed.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to follow the IATP on Twitter at @the_IATP. Also, hit the like and subscribe button below, and check out our website at www.theiatp.org.